Good morning, it's Dr. Ken Long with a presentation for the Colorado Tech University 2020 Doctoral Symposium, virtual, for October 2020. Here's my background. So I want to talk about four things: design thinking, visual storyboarding, developing and managing research, and improving effective communication. Design thinking has a long, interesting literature that is aimed at improving the connection between creativity and delivery of profitable solutions. That connection, we would wish, would be reliable, predictable, useful, and add value. Visual storyboarding is a way to connect to our story-making brains and powerful visual cortex to rapidly communicate. And well-chosen metaphors, analogies, and pictures help us rapidly make sense of our world and communicate those ideas in useful ways. The use of visual storyboarding can help us develop big picture concepts for research and establish roadmaps to guide our research. You can think of it as a 30,000 foot flyover to get a big picture, but also it could be a detailed set of trip instructions to guide the details of our journey. So it can accommodate both of those requirements. And finally, improving visual effective communication through storyboards really helps us make our meetings and collaborations useful, dynamic, and interesting. Design thinking is connected to the literature on wicked problems, which do not lend themselves to easy, routine, rational utility models of decision making. They typically involve, in design thinking, the co-evolution of problems and solutions. So you're working on a tentative frame for the problem as well as potential solutions in an iterative dynamic. With rapid prototyping and tentative boundaries supported by a diverse team, you can bring together some dynamic, artful, experienced judgment to test our working definition of the problem against tentative solutions, and then in that cyclic process, you can end up with some very interesting, rapidly generated possible solutions. When you do that in parallel with operations, you can actually initiate necessary activities and receive feedback from those first steps and use that to update your assessment of the situation, much in the same way that Bayesian statistics allow us to revise our estimates of what's going on in the world. It's a continuous process of design thinking and operational performance that is characteristic of very effective teams. This is a wiring diagram on the right-hand side that shows what the inside of a designer's mind might look at. It starts in the center with a focus on purpose, risk, the problem to be solved, the method that's being chosen, the working tentative list of solution or solutions that are providing the insights, decisions, actions, and ongoing assessment about the situation. If we go up one level, we're taking an environmental or an ecosystem approach to an understanding of the world, where we're looking at actors, forces, structures, and context over time, monitoring change and how that affects performance and consequences. And that might be supported at a lower level by a number of professional models, in this case like the Intel prep of the battlefield that looks at the terrain, enemy, and the self, or the UVIDLA process in Department of Defense, where planners are trying to understand, visualize, describe, direct, lead, and assess large organizations to accomplish missions. So everything in that stack looks like professional habits of mind or domain-specific models that are used to populate the design thinking process that's being engaged in a ecosystem approach. So a designer's mind is typically looking at multiple levels across time with support from both artful and scientific judgment. Here's a storyboard that describes a situation in which we can see a relatively well-defined problem with a desirable end state that could be similarly described in 3 different courses of action that might be bounded by parameters of cost and risk, and you could add any number of other variables and constraints and opportunities as well. But this is an example of a storyboard that we used to have a design team discussion about exactly all 4 of those variables: problem, cost, end state, and risk, and to develop some ideas of what the different separable, unique, and achievable courses of action might actually take. So starting with this kind of diagram, it allowed us to visit the entire ecosystem and talk about what seemed to be the next most important thing. So this storyboard was a way to organize the process and to support the process and to document the process of design thinking. Here's one that we used in order to ensure that the people we had around the stakeholder table were accounted for, and we didn't want to just take the obvious stakeholders like the internal and external clients, but also making sure we were clear about who the chief decision maker would be. And we included an area for a desired future, because we saw that that could actually be a stakeholder. It could represent a future state that we wanted to have represented, to have a voice in how we would proceed. The unlikely suspects was a deliberate creative process to make sure that we were looking beyond the immediacy of the moment so that we could anticipate some of those second and third order effects. And so this mental model, this visual map on the whiteboard, allowed us to rapidly determine who needed to be associated with the project so that we could scope and staff it properly. This is a storyboard that helped us design and then deliver a very interesting master's thesis that looked at how to combat centuries-long violence in Azerbaijan in the Nagorno-Karabakh region. And so what started off as a simple model that began with the Galtung triangle of violence, the researcher developed a parallel, more comprehensive model that documented his view of the ecosystem in which he found himself and allowed him to array these magnetic poles that would draw the situation towards violence to the north or more towards peace. And this model helped him see every transaction between stakeholders as an opportunity space where the outcomes would move the entire ecosystem towards one pole or the other. And he identified sources of issues that came out of cultural as well as structural drivers of change, and allowed him to consider the role of outsiders that were not around the table but who had influence in the local situation, and then even further, those who were at a distance observing, supporting, threatening peace, or helping move towards peace. So this model allowed him to clarify his initial collection of thoughts, and he was deeply involved in that situation, and so the model and the visual representation helped him to step outside and look at it from multiple perspectives. It also allowed the research committee to analyze the implications of the model and develop the set of notes you see on the left, which we use to guide the year-long research process, and we were very satisfied with the way the visual representation helped us actually achieve that effect. A derivative model of that went deeper into exploring the metaphor of stakeholders around a table inside a room, inside a fenced compound, being observed from the outside world. And these layers of potential players and actors allowed us to understand the dynamics and the choices that we had in determining who would be at the table and why should they be there, and who would run the meetings and who else needed to be in the room to provide support or follow-up or feedback, and who would be excluded from the room because of perhaps negative impacts or an unwillingness to work with people inside the room. And then we considered the second and third order effects of stakeholders who are observing and reporting and might cause additional policy choices to be made in the broader world. And then drilling down into each of those stakeholders, we were able to come up with a list of variables or features that we would use to analyze each stakeholder so we could understand who was participating. So this powerful metaphor of a stakeholder meeting and this visual representation helped us understand actually how many choices there were when it came to understanding stakeholders. This is a process mind map that helps us visualize possible solutions, and we call it the modified SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so this was a action research community support project in which we started with eliciting the strengths and weaknesses of the organization and situation, the opportunities and threats that could be found in the local environment, and then going through a systematic process of matching strengths with opportunities to identify Category 1 strategies. These were strategies in which we could win because the strengths could seize the opportunities and we could create value. Category 2 strategies were ones in which we wanted to protect our weaknesses against environmental threats. And so the nature of those strategies was decidedly different than those of Category 1. Category 3 strategies in this model would allow us to find opportunities to improve our weaknesses at low cost, a low-risk way of strengthening our position, our resistance to a virus, let's say. And Category 4 would be those in which we decided that the threat was so persistent and capable that we needed to divert some of our strengths in order to take away the power of the threat. So at the end of this first round of analysis, we had these itemized categories of facts and observations. Round 2 analysis allowed us to generate a list of 4 different categorical possible solutions. Third round of analysis would allow us to pick and choose from among these to craft an overall strategy with an asset allocation model that would pick the best blend of strategies upon which to proceed. So this visual model helped us identify and then choose among a wide variety of solutions. This model was used to help re-engineer the traditional lecture pedagogy that we used in a military college, in which we took a look at stovepiped departmental areas of expertise that would go through principles, applied examples, detailed analysis, and which were integrated across the principles, but not really in the applied examples and the detailed analysis. This stovepiping prevented us from really producing integrated curriculum. And so by understanding how the different levels of detail in our curriculum manifested, we were able to recast this away from a matrix organization and more into a virtual, dynamic, integrated heuristic in which we would pick rich case studies in which all of the departments would have things to say at the principal level, where we could explore examples from each of the departments that were manifest in that case study, and then by exception go into a detailed analysis as needed to get to the level of professionalism that we needed. We turned those insights into a structured note-taking system, a modified Cornell note-taking system that allowed us to capture the insights generated by the professional dialogue in a way that was easy to recall and supported future assessments and could be the basis as a building block for future education. So this is a way in which these visual models can really support communication. In a consulting project, a consultant in the financial services industry put together a top-level storyboard that incorporated processes, procedures, bodies of knowledge, ways of learning into a series of nested chunks of knowledge that he was able to use to develop personalized training and education packages for a variety of international clients. And so the top level storyboard was a way to rapidly communicate the potential for possible development and also support the build out of particular adaptive packages. So what I've hoped to share with you here briefly was the idea of design thinking, storyboarding in the use of planning and managing research, how it can be used to help communication between people and organizations in a variety of settings. And I am interested in working with you and following up if you have more particular questions. This was kind of a rapid fire presentation, but we only have so much time, and I wanted to give you a broad view of just the many different ways in which design thinking, visual communication can be helpful. I would say that having worked in these concepts for over 25 years, that visual storyboarding and mind mapping really supports a lifelong journey of collaboration. It helps you organize and leverage research networks. And if you think of your research network as an approach to thinking, illustrating your ideas, communicating those ideas, then collaborating in a network, allowing you to iterate, generate, and validate the knowledge that comes out of that collaboration, and then leads you to demonstrate, replicate, and celebrate the results of your research, that visual storyboarding and mind mapping and design thinking will really help you rapidly develop possibilities. It gives you a roadmap on how to go after rigorous assessment of results, supports your collaborative team learning, and lets you build on vision and creativity and communicate that among your members of your research team. So that's my contact information. I'm happy to take follow-up questions and work with you in any way that I can add value. I'm eager to do that. So thanks so much for your kind attention. Looking forward to our future collaborations. Take good care.